Shedeur has been giving the Browns something they haven't had in years: hope with substance. Not just flashes of talent, not just preseason hype videos, but tangible, measurable, game-changing performances. The kind of play where, if you were just watching the tape with no nameplates, you'd think this guy had been starting the league for years. His reads are crisp, his pocket presence is better than half the veterans, and his throws, they land exactly where they need to. The numbers are there. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. The tape is there. The leadership is there. And yet, somehow, the praise isn't. After his latest preseason game, where Sanders basically dragged the Browns' offense into efficiency by sheer force of execution, you expect Coach Kevin Stefanski to come out and say something like, "That's what a leader looks like," or "the kid's making it impossible to keep him off the field." Instead, crickets. Not a single mention of Sanders' name in the immediate locker room speech. Not even a passing, "Good job, Rook," in the post-game presser. The spotlight somehow found its way to other talking points: the running game, the defensive hustle, some minor adjustments in special teams. Everything except the quarterback, who just orchestrated the cleanest offensive drives of the night. Now, maybe if this happened once, you could chalk it up to oversight, but this is becoming a pattern. Every time Sanders puts on a show, Stefanski finds a way to frame it as part of overall team growth or a work in progress. That sounds harmless until you realize how rare it is for a coach not to publicly lift up a young QB who's outperforming expectations. And that's where the whispers start. Is this just tough love coaching, or is there something deeper? Let's not ignore the racial and cultural undercurrents here. Sanders isn't just a rookie. He's Deion Sanders' son. That means he walks into every room with two things: enormous name recognition and a perception of privilege. In some NFL circles, that combination makes people double down on making you earn it, even if you've already earned it on the field. For a lot of coaches and old-school analysts, admitting Sanders is ready would feel like letting him skip the line. So instead, they nitpick, they minimize, they keep moving the goalpost for what ready looks like. Even Cam Newton got it on the act, and you'd think Cam, of all people, would understand the grind of being doubted. But instead of celebrating Sanders' poise, Cam pivoted to questioning his quarterbacking IQ. It's the oldest trick in the book. When you can't knock the stats or the film, you shift the conversation to something vague and subjective, like mental processing or intangibles. Basically, you take the one area no box score can prove and use it as your lever to keep someone out of the conversation. The irony? Sanders' football IQ is exactly what's been turning heads for the people who actually break down film for a living. Herm Edwards, who's forgotten more about the game than most commentators will ever know, went on record saying Sanders plays like a veteran. And not in the overhyped for a rookie way, but in the reads the defense in real time and manipulates safeties with his eyes way. That's advanced stuff. That's years ahead stuff. But here's where Shedeur separates himself from other rookies who might lash out in frustration. He's not letting anyone else write his story for him. When Tony Grossi, who's made a career out of poking at quarterbacks, kept throwing shade his way in the media, Sanders didn't go off on him. He didn't slam him on social media or feed the drama. He confronted him directly, face-to-face, and asked a simple question: why the constant negativity? That's the kind of controlled confrontation that flips the power dynamic. Instead of being the story, Sanders forces the critic to explain themselves. And that's why, no matter what narrative the NFL machine tries to push, Sanders keeps winning the long game. Every time someone tries to diminish him, he answers in two places: on the field and in measured, calculated public interactions. That's how you build a legacy that sticks. You show receipts. You stay composed. And you keep stacking undeniable performances until even your harshest detractors start sounding ridiculous. What's fascinating is how the Cleveland fan base is reacting. They see the games. They know what they're watching. And they're not shy about pointing out the disconnect between what's happening on the field and what's being said behind the podium. When Sanders makes a perfect 25-yard sideline throw under pressure, the crowd reacts like it's a regular season playoff drive. That energy doesn't come from hype alone. It comes from recognition. Fans know when they got something real, and Cleveland's patience for QB experiments is razor-thin after years of disappointment. This puts Stefanski in a tough spot. On one hand, he probably wants to control Sanders' development, keep him humble, avoid giving him too much too soon. On the other hand, the more he downplays, the more it looks like he's holding Sanders back for reasons that have nothing to do with football. And in today's media climate, perception is reality. The longer this goes on, the more the public narrative will be that Sanders is ready and Stefanski is protecting the status quo. From Sanders' perspective, though, this might be the perfect proving ground. Every snap he gets now is high leverage, not because the scoreboard depends on it, but because every completion is another crack in the wall of resistance. Every smart decision, every perfectly timed release, every red zone touchdown is another reason it becomes impossible to keep him off the field. It also helps that Sanders' marketability is off the charts. He's media trained, camera comfortable, and naturally charismatic without coming across as rehearsed. In a league that thrives on stars who can both perform and sell the game, Sanders is exactly the kind of face a franchise wants, whether certain decision-makers are ready to admit it or not. His jerseys are already moving fast. His highlights trend on social media within minutes, and he's quickly becoming the player young fans mimic in their backyard games. That cultural pull is a force no front office can ignore forever. But let's not pretend the path ahead is smooth. The NFL has a long history of young quarterbacks being managed into obscurity if they don't fit neatly into the hierarchy. Sanders will have to keep winning in ways that leave no wiggle room for his critics. That means clean stat lines, low turnovers, and, most importantly, visible leadership moments that teammates can rally around. Because once the locker room starts seeing him as a guy, it doesn't matter what's said in press conferences. And make no mistake, that's already happening. Veterans like Myles Garrett and Amari Cooper have been dropping little comments that, while not outright endorsements, make it clear they see what Sanders is bringing. A subtle, he's easy to work with here. The ball comes out quick there. These are the breadcrumbs that tell you a quarterback is winning the room. Once the team is behind him, the coaching staff will follow whether they like it or not. The more the NFL tries to slow-roll Sanders' rise, the more it risks looking like it's fighting against the inevitable. And in sports, the inevitable has a way of breaking through at the most inconvenient time for those trying to hold it back. Maybe it's a string of preseason wins. Maybe it's a big moment in joint practices where he carves up a top-tier defense. Maybe it's an injury to the current starter that forces the team's hand. However it happens, the momentum is only building in one direction. Right now, Shedeur Sanders isn't just playing quarterback. He's playing the game within the game, the politics, the optics, the narrative control. And he's winning that, too. He's doing it by refusing to be baited, refusing to be boxed in, and refusing to let anyone else set the ceiling on his potential. That's not just rare for a rookie. That's rare for any player. And here's the kicker. If this keeps up, the very people trying to downplay him now will be the same ones praising his resilience and growth later, as if they weren't the obstacles in the first place. It's happened before in this league, and it'll happen again. The difference is, Sanders sees it coming, and he's already playing the long game to make sure his story ends the way he wants it told. See, the NFL is not just a sports league. It's a carefully managed entertainment empire. Every player who breaks through to the mainstream doesn't just have to be talented. They have to fit into a storyline that's been pre-approved by the invisible hand steering the narrative. And Sanders? He's a disruptor. He didn't enter through the humble, overlooked backup, gets a chance door. He came in with name recognition, swagger, and a personal brand already bigger than some veterans. That kind of presence doesn't always mesh with the old guard preference for building stars from scratch. Now, let's be real. Cleveland should be embracing this. The Browns haven't had a quarterback capable of energizing the fan base, dominating headlines, and selling hope all at the same time in, well, decades. Sanders has already done that in a preseason window, and he's done it without imploding or embarrassing the franchise. That's rare. And yet, instead of leaning into it, Stefanski and certain analysts seem to be testing how much they can control the rise. This is where the long game gets tricky. Sanders' best asset right now isn't just his arm or his football IQ. It's his patience. He's not begging for the starting role in front of cameras. He's not throwing teammates under the bus. And he's not letting the narrative of he's not ready rattle him. He's stacking clean performances and letting others make the case for him. That's leadership 101, and it's going to force the Browns into a corner sooner rather than later. Here's the thing. Locker rooms know when a QB is the guy long before the public does. It's in the way he handles a huddle, how he talks to the O-line after a busted play, how he reacts to a receiver dropping a catch. Word spreads fast inside a team, and when veterans start quietly saying, "This kid should be starting," that's when the tide shifts. Once the locker room leans one way, resisting it becomes a losing battle for a coach. We're already seeing early signs of that shift. While no one's outright calling for Sanders to start, the subtext is there. Post-practice comments from players about energy or swagger in the offense. Mentions of how the ball's coming out faster. Casual remarks about how prepared he is in film sessions. Those little things add up, and they're the first cracks in the wall holding him back. Meanwhile, outside the building, fans are growing impatient with the wait-and-see approach. In a city like Cleveland, where loyalty is fierce but patience is finite, there's no such thing as a slow rollout when you've got a quarterback who looks ready. Every week Sanders sits as a week the fan base feels like the team is wasting potential. That frustration doesn't just stay in the stands. It filters into media coverage, which ramps up pressure on the coaching staff. And that's where this becomes more than just a football decision. If the Browns cave to public pressure too soon and Sanders struggles, Stefanski risks looking like he let the crowd run the team. If they hold him back too long, and he keeps shining in limited opportunities, they risk alienating both the fan base and the player. Either way, the safe middle ground is shrinking by the day. Here's the irony. The people trying to control Sanders' rise are actually accelerating it. Every time a post-game presser sidesteps his contributions, fans and media double down on discussing why. Every time an analyst downplays his skill set, clips of his perfect sideline throws and pressure reads go viral in response. The more they try to slow the momentum, the more undeniable it becomes. From a purely football standpoint, Sanders' style is tailor-made for today's NFL. Quick reads, decisive releases, mobility without relying on scrambling. He's a kind of QB who thrives in RPO-heavy schemes and can also sit in the pocket and slice up zone coverages. That versatility makes him scheme-proof. It also means he can build an offense around him without overhauling the entire playbook, which is exactly what a franchise in transition needs. But here's where the business side kicks in. Sanders' presence doesn't just change the quarterback room. It changes the Browns' marketability overnight. His jersey sales, social media presence, and national recognition give the team a PR weapon they haven't had in years. That's not just hype, that's revenue. And revenue talks loud in NFL front offices. You can almost guarantee there are people in the organization who see the financial upside of making Sanders the face of the team, regardless of Stefanski's cautious approach. The question is, how long can internal tug-of-war last before someone makes a decisive call? History says not long. We've seen it before. A young QB forces his way into the lineup by sheer momentum, the fan base rallies behind him, and suddenly the team's identity shifts overnight. The only difference here is that Sanders' ascent is being slowed by forces that seem less about readiness and more about politics. And politics in the NFL is a dangerous game. When a player starts winning the public over faster than the coaching staff is comfortable with, it can lead to fractures in trust. That's why Sanders' decision to stay composed is so important. If he gets frustrated publicly, it'll be spun as ego. If he keeps his head down and his plays sharp, every decision to keep him sidelined will look more and more like a miscalculation. There's also the mentor dynamic to consider. Sanders' father, Dion, has navigated media storms his entire career and knows how to play the long game with public perception. You can bet that behind the scenes, Shedeur is getting advice not just on football mechanics, but on how to win the narrative battle. That's an edge most rookies don't have, and it's going to make him even harder to suppress. The upcoming joint practices and preseason reps are going to be a proving ground, not just for Sanders' game, but for the Browns' ability to justify their timeline. If he lights up a top-tier defense in front of cameras, The "he's not ready" argument collapses overnight. If he's merely solid, the Browns get a little more breathing room. But the worst-case scenario for Stefanski? Sanders makes it so obvious that everyone, fans, media, teammates, starts asking the same question. Why isn't he starting yet? And that's when the real pressure starts. Because once the locker room and the fan base are aligned, holding the line becomes almost impossible without looking like you're prioritizing ego over winning. The NFL moves fast, and momentum is a fragile thing. Right now, Sanders has it in spades, and the Browns are running out of ways to slow it down without causing blowback. The end game here feels inevitable. At some point, whether it's because of injury, poor play from the starter, or overwhelming public demand, Sanders is going to get his shot with the first team. And when he does, the bar will be sky high. If he delivers, this entire stretch will be remembered as the awkward prelude to a franchise turnaround. If he stumbles, it'll be spun as proof that the Browns were right to wait. Either way, the next few weeks aren't just about reps and stats. They're about control. Who controls the narrative, who controls the decision-making, and who ultimately controls the direction of the franchise. Right now, Shedeur Sanders is playing chess in a league full of checkers, and whether the Browns are ready to admit it or not, he's winning. From day one, Sanders has walked in with an aura, not arrogance, not cockiness, but an undeniable self-assurance that changes the temperature in a room. He's a guy who sits in the front during team meetings, doesn't glance at his phone once, and still manages to crack a joke during a tense moment without derailing the focus. That's leadership in disguise, the kind that doesn't have to be declared to be recognized. And here's where things get interesting. Veterans are starting to notice. It's one thing for rookies to gravitate toward a young QB. That's expected. But when established stars like Myles Garrett start lingering after practice to talk through defensive reads with you, or when a veteran receiver like Amari Cooper takes extra red zone reps to work on timing with you, that's a signal to the rest of the roster. Without a word being said, the message becomes clear. This guy is worth investing in. That's the cultural crack in the wall. NFL locker rooms thrive on unspoken consensus. When enough players start buying into someone, the rest tend to follow. That buy-in isn't built on hype or press conferences. It's built on the way Sanders drops back on a 3-yard D, and 7, stares down a disguised safety blitz, and still delivers a ball that hits his receiver in stride. Players live for those moments because they know that's what wins games in January. But culture shifts like this are dangerous for coaches who are trying to control the depth chart narrative. If you've got a quarterback room with an anointed starter, maybe one with a hefty contract or years of service, and suddenly the room is buzzing about the rookie, that puts you in a bind. You either acknowledge the buzz and deal with the fallout from your veteran, or you clamp down on the conversation and risk alienating the rest of the team. It's not just the locker room dynamics either. Sanders is starting to reshape the practice culture. Early in camp, most of the 7-on-7 sessions were routine, standard drills, clean but unspectacular reps. Since Sanders started getting more snaps, the competitive fire has noticeably spiked. Receivers are running sharper routes. Defensive backs are disguising coverages better. Even the pass rushers are timing their jumps like it's a Sunday afternoon in the regular season. Why? Because Sanders doesn't treat practice like filler time. He treats every rep like it's the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. And when your quarterback brings that kind of energy, it's contagious. Now, from a leadership perspective, this is the kind of thing that makes a franchise dangerous in the best way. But from an organizational politics standpoint, it's messy. Coaches want control competition, just enough to keep everyone sharp, but not so much that it challenges the hierarchy they've spent the offseason building. Sanders is disrupting that balance without even opening his mouth. Then there's the media factor. Cleveland sports press is famously relentless, and they've started to catch wind of this undercurrent in the locker room. Every time Stefanski sidesteps a question about giving Sanders more first-team reps, it becomes another headline. Every viral clip of Sanders threading a needle in practice adds fuel to the fire. And the more the organization tries to play it cool, the more the buzz grows. The danger for the Browns is that this stops being a local story and starts becoming a national one. National sports shows love a quarterback controversy, especially one with a charismatic, marketable rookie at the center. The moment this thing breaks past Cleveland and becomes a regular talking point on ESPN or FS1, the pressure skyrockets. You can't hide a player like Sanders forever when every analyst in the country is cutting up his film and wondering why he's not starting. Inside the locker room, this kind of pressure can either unite a team or fracture it. If the veterans on offense start openly lobbying for Sanders, you can see subtle signs of friction with the current starter. Maybe a receiver starts looking frustrated in games where the offense stalls. Maybe linemen give a little extra effort in the snaps Sanders gets. These are the tiny shifts that tell you a locker room is leaning in a new direction. On the flip side, there's also the chance that Sanders' rise forces everyone, even a veteran starter, to elevate their game. Quarterbacks are competitors to their core, and nothing sharpens focus like someone threatening your spot. If the starter responds by balling out, Cleveland could end up with a win-win scenario in the short term. But let's be honest, QB rooms aren't exactly known for long-term harmony when a takeover feels inevitable. What's fascinating here is how Sanders himself is navigating all of this. He's not campaigning for the job. He's not feeding the media sound bites that could turn this into open warfare. He's letting his play speak for itself. That restraint is a killer move because it makes him look like the adult in the room. And in a league where maturity at the quarterback position is prized almost as much as arm strength, that's an image that sticks. Of course, behind closed doors, you have to imagine conversations are getting more pointed. The offensive coordinator knows what Sanders can do. Position coaches are seeing it every day in drills. At some point, the reports being handed to Stefanski are going to paint a picture he can't ignore without raising eyebrows in the building. That's when an internal push to give Sanders more meaningful reps will get louder. And here's the wild card: injuries. The NFL is brutal, and all it takes is one awkward hit or one bad stretch for the starter to end up sidelined. If that happens, the Browns will have no choice but to put Sanders in, and if he delivers in that spot, there's no going back. That's how rookie takeovers have happened throughout history, from Tom Brady to Dak Prescott. And once the fan base sees it in real time, the job is his. The longer Cleveland waits, the riskier it gets. Because right now, the city is in a rare place, hopeful, excited, and united around a player who's still technically a backup. That energy is a gift. And if the organization mishandles it, they could sour the relationship before Sanders even gets a chance to own the starting role. From a macro view, this whole situation is a case study in how talent, culture, and narrative collide in the NFL. Sanders is talented enough to force the football conversation. His demeanor and approach are strong enough to shift locker room culture. And his name, combined with his play, is magnetic enough to dominate the narrative whether the Browns want it to or not. The question isn't if Sanders becomes a starter. It's when, and under what circumstances. If it's on the team's terms, they can control the rollout, protect the locker room, and maximize the marketing push. If it's forced by public pressure or an emergency, they lose control of the story. And Sanders takes center stage on his own terms. Either way, this isn't a quarterback battle anymore. It's the slow but unstoppable rise of a player who's already won over the building, the city, and soon the league. And whether the Browns embrace it now or later, Shedeur Sanders is coming.